Ada sold her shadow for the one thing she couldn't live without, her husband's life. The price seemed simple, the consequences were not. 6 months later, people started looking straight through her. With only weeks left, she must enter the forbidden valley of shadows and take back what she gave away. But the shadow she found beside her on the shelf belonged to the mother she buried 22 years ago. She woke up at midnight to drink water. The moonlight was coming through the window the way it always came through that window. Quiet, ordinary. The same moonlight that had come through that window every night for the 6 years she had lived in that house. She stood in the middle of the room. Emeka was asleep on the mat. His shadow stretched long and dark across the floor beside her. The chair had a shadow. The water pot had a shadow. The window had a shadow. She looked down at the floor where her own shadow was supposed to be, and the floor was clean. No shadow, nothing. Just moonlight falling on the ground where she was standing, as though she was not standing there at all, as though the room could not see her, as though she was already becoming something the world did not fully recognize anymore. She had sold her shadow 3 years ago. She had told herself she would not miss it. Standing in that moonlight at midnight, looking at the empty floor where her shadow should have been, she understood for the first time what she had actually given away. My name is Jessie, your narrator, and the woman standing in that moonlight was named Ada. And what she gave away that night was not just a shadow. It was the only thing standing between her and something so old and so patient and so completely without mercy that it had been collecting shadows since before the village of Okpara had a name. She had 1 year to get it back. 1 year before it came to collect permanently. 1 year before she stopped being real. This is the story of what Ada did with that year. And what she found when she went to take her shadow back, nobody was expecting. Not even Ada. To understand why Ada made this deal, you need to understand what she came home to every evening. Emeka, her husband, 37 years old, a man who had spent his whole adult life being the kind of person who fixed things. The neighbor whose fence fell down called Amaka. The market woman whose generator refused to start called Amaka. The kind of man people call because they know he will come and he will stay until the problem is solved. 2 years ago, something got into his body that none of those qualities could fix. It started as tiredness, the kind that does not lift after sleep. Then the weight loss. Then the pain that came without warning and left without explanation. Then the days when he could not stand up without help. 3 hospitals, 7 doctors, more medicine than Ada could name. Nothing worked. The money ran out at the end of the first year. They sold what they could sell. Ada worked at 4 in the morning and slept after midnight, and in between she did everything. The cooking, the children, the hospital visits, the prayers. The children were 8 and 6 years old enough to understand that something was wrong. Old enough to be quiet in the careful way that children are quiet when the adults around them are already carrying too much. Ada looked at her son one evening and realized she had not heard him laugh in 3 months. That was the night she made the decision. Not the decision to sell her shadow. That came later. The decision that she was going to fix this by any means available to her. That she was done trying the things that were not working. 3 days after she made that decision, the woman appeared at her door. She was dressed too well for Okpara. The wrapper she wore cost more than most people in this village made in a month. Her shoes were clean in a way that shoes in a village with red earth roads are never clean. Her jewelry was real in the specific way that real jewelry is real. Not flashy, just undeniably genuine. The second thing Ada noticed was the smell. Something between flowers and river water. Not unpleasant, just not quite right. Like a copy of a smell that someone had made very carefully but had missed something essential in the making. She said she had heard about Ada's situation. Ada asked who she was. She smiled. She said names were not important. What was important was that she could help. That there was a way to fix Emeka that Ada had not tried yet. That the price was simple, simpler than Ada would believe. Ada asked what the price was. The woman said, "Your shadow. Just your shadow. You will not even miss it." Ada looked at this woman standing in her doorway smelling of almost flower. She thought about every sensible reason to send her away. Then she heard Emeka cough from the back room. The specific cough he had developed in the last month. The one that sounded like something tearing loose inside him. She said yes. The woman reached out and touched Ada's shadow where it fell across the doorstep. Ada felt nothing. That was what frightened her most about it later. She felt absolute nothing. The woman walked away down the road and did not look back. And 3 hours later, Ada was standing in the moonlight looking at the empty floor where her shadow used to be, understanding that she had just made the most important decision of her life and had not understood what she was deciding. 3 weeks. That was how long it took. On the first day, Emeka's pain was slightly less. On the third day, he sat up without help for the first time in 4 months. On the 7th day, he walked to the door and stood in the morning sun and breathed. Ada watched his shadow stretch long and clear across the compound floor. She looked at where her own shadow should have been beside his. Nothing. She looked away. By the 3rd week, Emeka was almost himself again, fixing things around the house, making the children laugh at dinner for the first time in longer than Ada could remember. Her son laughed. Ada sat at the table and listened to her son laugh and told herself she had made the right decision. She believed it. For about 3 months, she genuinely believed it. Then the small thing started. It started with the reflection. Ada went to fetch water one morning and looked down at her reflection in the barrel. It was there, but it arrived late. She moved her head. The reflection moved, but not at the same moment. A half second behind, like a copy that had not quite caught up with the original. The footsteps were next. She was walking through the market on a Wednesday morning. Every trader's footstep audible on the hard-packed earth. Every customer's movements tracked in sound. Hers were not. She stopped. She lifted her foot and brought it down hard deliberately. Silence. The woman beside her turned at the noise of her own movement. She did not turn at Ada's. Then her neighbor called her name across the compound fence. Ada was standing right there, 3 feet away. Her neighbor called again, then said to nobody, "Wait, was Ada here just now? I thought I saw her." Ada said, "I am here." Her neighbor startled. She looked directly at Ada. She said, "Sorry, I did not see you there." The worst moment came at 6 months. Ada's daughter ran into the house from school, excited, calling for her mother. She went to the kitchen. She went to the bedroom. She came back to the sitting room and stood right beside Ada and called her name again. Ada was standing there. Her daughter did not see her. Ada said, "I am here." Her daughter jumped. She blinked twice. She said, "Sorry, Mama, I did not see you there." Ada smiled. She said, "Let me see your drawing." She looked at the drawing. She said it was beautiful. Her daughter beamed and ran back outside. Ada stood alone in the room. And she understood that the fading was not coming. It had already started. She had 6 months left, and she was already disappearing. Her name was Mama Shielo, the oldest woman in Okpara, the kind of old that stopped being a number and become a quality. She had always made Ada slightly uncomfortable, the way she looked at people, as though she was hearing more than the words, as though there was another layer of information available to her that most people could not access. She came to Ada's door at 3 in the afternoon, on the same day Ada's daughter had stood beside her for 30 seconds without seeing her. She said, "I know what you did. I know what you gave. I know what is coming for you in 6 months if you did not act." Ada said, "Coming." Mama Shielo told her everything about Ogwoji, the dark merchant, the entity collecting shadows since before the oldest memory anyone could reach, about the 1-year deadline, about the fading that was not death but erasure. Nobody, no grave, simply no longer present. She told her about Iloji, the valley of shadow inside the Iroko tree at the edge of the forest, the hand against the back, the name spoken 3 times, the glass vessel, the hourly patrol, the 1 hour Ada would have. She told her what happened if Ogwoji caught her inside. Not death, not fading, something worse than both. You stay inside as a shadow, aware of everything, able to see the living world, unable to reach it forever. Ada asked how Mama Shielo knew all of this. Mama Shielo looked at the door for a long time. Then she said, "I have been inside." Ada asked if she got out. "Yes," Mama Shielo said. Ada noticed something then. Mama Shielo was sitting in afternoon light that fell directly through the window behind her. Her shadow was there, but it was thin. Not the solid dark shadow that afternoon light produced. Something lighter, like a copy of a shadow rather than the real thing. Ada noticed this. She did not say anything about it. She stored it away, and she asked Mama Shielo to tell her everything about Iloji. 9 months, 10 months, 11 months. Ada spent the time between Mama Shielo's visit and the last night of the 11 months doing something that looked like grief but was actually preparation. She memorized the layouts of Iloji, the eastern shell first, then western, then north, the recent taken shadow on the 3rd shell from the top, the patrol starting from the eastern end and moving west. 1 hour between each patrol, exactly 1 hour from the moment she entered. She memorized the method: break the vessel, press the shadow back against the body immediately. Do not let it drift. It will try to go upward. Press it back fast and firm and hold it until it takes. She practiced this at home with her own hand against her arm. The physical muscle memory of emotion she had never performed but needed to perform in the dark under pressure. She practiced walking silently in her house at night. Her children thought she had lost her mind. She did not correct them. 11 months, 1 week. The fading was worse. Emeka noticed something was wrong with his wife. He asked her what it was. She tried 3 times to tell him. Each time, the word dissolved in her mouth before they reached the air. Not because she was afraid, because she could not. The ability to speak truth about the deal was the first thing to go. She looked at her husband across the table. She said, "I am fine." The word came out without difficulty, because they were not the truth. 11 months, 3 weeks. The last 7 days felt shorter than the entire year. Time was compressing. The deadline pulling the remaining hours towards it like water towards a drain. On the last day, she made dinner for her family. She watched them eat. Emeka, her son, her daughter, and her drawing on the wall. She memorized the sound of Emeka's voice. After dinner, she put the children to bed. She sat with Emeka for an hour. Then she said she was going to sleep early. She waited until the house was completely quiet. Then she got up. She put on her shoe. She walked to the door. She put her hands on the door frame for just a moment. Then she walked out into the night. She found the tree without difficulty. The oldest Iroko tree in the forest at the edge of Okpara, older than the village, older than the name of the village. The trunk so wide she would have needed 6 people with arms outstretched to cycle it. The bark deeply ridged and ancient, in the specific way that things are ancient when they have been somewhere for so long the world has built up around them, and they have simply remained. The forest was completely silent. No insect, no wind. The silence of a forest that knows something is happening and is paying attention. Ada placed her right hand flat against the bark, cold in a way that bark should not be cold. The cold of a place that has never been touched by sunlight in all the time it has existed. She said her name, Ada. She said it again, Ada. She said it a 3rd time, Ada. The bark under her hand shifted, not dramatically, a slight movement like skin moving over muscles, the tree acknowledging something. And where her hand was pressed, there was no longer bark. There was an opening. Dark inside, cold air coming from within. Ada breathed. One breath, she stepped inside. The inside of the tree was not the inside of a tree. The space opened outward in every direction as though the tree was simply the door, and what lay behind the door had nothing to do with the dimension of the tree itself. Shelves stretched as far as she could see. Something darker than wood, the material absorbing rather than reflecting the cold blue-green light that came from no visible source. On every shelf, glass vessels, hundreds, thousands, each glowing faintly, each one containing something that shifted slightly inside the glass. Not liquid, not solid. The specific movement of something aware and contained, and that has been both for a long time. Shadows. Every shadow from every person who had ever made this bargain. Ada did not allow herself to feel the enormity of it. She counted the shapes from the top. 1, 2, 3. 3rd shape from the top, she moved. Silently, the way she had practiced. Heel first, weight distributed, no sound from the ground beneath her feet. Then she heard it. Far away, very far but present. A sound that was not footstep, not breathing. A sound that measured time, like counting but in a language that had existed before human language existed. In a frequency she felt in her chest rather than heard with her ear. Ogwoji, starting his patrol. She had 1 hour. She moved faster. She found it on the 3rd shelf. 7 vessels from the left end. Her name present in the glass itself, the way a name is present in a person's face. You recognize it before you can explain how. The shadow inside shifted towards her immediately, not the way the other shadows had shifted as she passed, with recognition, with the specific reaching quality of something that knows it belonged to the person now standing in front of it. She reached for it and saw what was beside it. A vessel covered in a layer of dust that suggested decades of sitting on a shelf in a cold dark valley being held, with a name on it. Her mother's name, Adeze. Ada stood with her hand halfway to her own vessel, and she looked at her mother's name. Her mother, who had died when Ada was 12 years old. Her mother's last word, the last thing she said before the illness took her. No matter what happens, I will always come back to you. She had never come back. Ada looked at the dust on her mother's vessel, 22 years of dust, and she understood. Her mother had made this same bargain for the same reason, and her mother had come to this valley to get her shadow back, and she had never made it out. Which meant her mother was not dead. Her mother was here, somewhere in this valley, trapped as a shadow for 22 years. Her mother had said she would always come back. She had tried. She just never reached the door. In the distance, the counting sound was slightly louder than it had been. Ada looked at her own vessel. She looked at her mother's vessel. She made a decision. She broke her own vessel first. The glass shattered quietly, not with the crash of breaking glass, with the specific sound of something very thin and very cold giving way under pressure. The shadow rushed out. Ada pressed both hands flat against her arms immediately, the way she had practiced, firm, fast and holding. The shadow tried to drift upward. She pressed harder. Hold it, hold it, hold it. Then she felt the room recognize her. That was the only way she could describe it afterward. The valley, which had been treating her as a presence, a living thing moving through a dead space, suddenly treated her as a person, fully real, fully present, fully here. She looked down. Her shadow stretched across the floor of the valley in the cold blue-green light. Dark and solid and real. She breathed. One breath, then she picked up her mother's vessel, and she went looking for her mother. She had 40 minutes. The oldest shadow were on the furthest shelves. Ada moved as quickly as she could move, silently towards the deepest part of the valley. The valley did not cooperate. A shelf she had passed would appear again from a different angle. A path she had noted as leading deeper would curve back towards the entrance. The geometry of the space was not fixed. It was breathing. The valley was breathing slowly, like a living thing in deep sleep, each breath rearranging the space slightly. Ada stopped. She closed her eyes. She oriented herself by the counting sound. It was coming from the east, moving west. She needed not. She moved. The vessels she passed as she went deeper were older, the dusk thicker, the shadows inside dimmer, held longer, further from the memory of being real. Then she heard something that stopped her completely. Her own voice. From behind her, calling her own name. Exactly the way she sounded, the specific pitch of her own voice saying the syllables of her own name. Ada. Ada. Every part of her wanted to turn around. She did not turn around. Mama Shielu had warned her. Sounds designed to make you stop moving forward. Voices that sounded familiar. The specific danger of looking back in a place that wanted you to stay. She kept moving. Not. The counting sound was louder. She had perhaps 25 minutes. Then she saw the oldest stuff. The dust on those vessels was not the dust of years, the dust of generations. She moved along the shelf. Name after name she did not recognize. Women from Okpara and surrounding village across decades. Each one a bargain made in desperation. And then, Adeze, her mother's vessel. The shadow inside barely visible, dim with 22 years of distance from the living world. But there, still there, Ada picked it up. The counting sound stopped. Ada froze. The counting sound stopping was worse than it being loud because it meant one thing. Ogwoji had found her. She ran. The vessels were vibrating. Not the gentle shift of shadow turning towards a living presence. A harder vibration. The specific frequency of glass responding to something moving through the space that was not Ada. She held her mother's vessel against her chest with her left arm and she ran. The path changed. She corrected. The entrance was not. She needed not to stay not. A vessel shattered on its own to her right, then another on her left. The shadow inside rushing upwards and dissolving into the valley ceiling. She heard her own voice again from behind her, closer this time. Ada, 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 wait. She did not wait. The code behind her was different from the code of the valley. Directional, coming from behind her and moving towards her. The specific code of something ancient that was angry for the first time in a very long time. It did not work. It arrived. One moment, the shelves behind her were empty. The next moment, something was there. She did not see it. She felt it. The displacement of the air. Something vast and purposeful occupying the space she had just left. She could see the entrance. The faint lighter darkness ahead. The way out. 30 feet. 20. The cold touched the back of her shadow. Not her, her shadow. She felt it. Something closing around it, beginning to pull. 10 feet. She threw herself at the entrance. Her hand hit the back from inside. She pressed her mother's vessel against the wood with everything she had. The vessel broke. The shadow rushed outward through the back, through the tree, into the night outside. The pulling on her shadow stopped, as though the release of the other shadow had been a transaction, something given, something satisfied. Ada fell through the opening into the night air. She hit the ground. She lay there breathing, just breathing. Then she heard something, a sound that was not the forest. A person, standing very close to her in the dark, breathing. Mama, Ada said it before she saw her clearly, before the moonlight found the figure standing 3 feet away in the dark, before she could confirm with her eyes what some other part of her had already confirmed without needing to look. Mama. The woman standing at the edge of the forest was 34 years old, the same age she had been when she went into the valley. 22 years inside Iloji had not touched her, had not aged her, had not changed the specific way she held her shoulder, or the specific shape of her hands, or the quality of her eyes that Ada had been looking at in the last photograph taken before she died for 22 years. Adeze, her mother, standing in the moonlight, casting a shadow that was solid and dark and real. Ada stood up from the ground. She looked at her mother. Her mother looked at her. For a long time, neither of them spoke, because there was too much to say, and saying any of it first felt like it would break something still very fragile. Then her mother said, "I am sorry I did not come back for you." Ada looked at the woman who had been trapped in a valley of shadow for 22 years, trying to get back to a 12-year-old girl who was now 34, who had made the same bargain for the same reason, who had never stopped trying to reach the door. She said, "You are here now." Her mother said, "Ada." Ada said, "You are here now." She said, "That is enough." And she crossed the 3 feet between them, and she held her mother. At the edge of the forest at midnight, both of them real, both of them present, both of them casting shadows in the moonlight. Ada held her mother and felt the specific sensation of something that has been wrong for 22 years becoming right. Not fixed, not erased, not as though the 22 years had not happened, just right. Finally, right. Emeka did not ask where Ada had been. He woke up and found his wife sitting at the kitchen table with a woman he had never seen before, and something in Ada's face told him that the explanation was going to be one of those explanations that takes a long time and requires several cups of tea. He put the kettle down. Ada's son came out for breakfast and looked at the woman sitting at the table. He said, "Who are you?" The woman looked at this boy, who was the grandson she had missed for 22 years. She said, "I am your grandmother." He looked at her. He looked at his mother. Ada said, "Eat your breakfast first." He sat down and ate, with the specific acceptance of a child who has learned that the adult world contains things that do not make immediate sense, and that eating breakfast while they are explaining is usually the right move. The week passed. Ada's mother stayed. She had nowhere else to go. Everything she had known was 22 years gone. But Ada's house was here, and Ada's children were here, and Emeka, who accepted impossible things with tea and patience, was here. She stayed. 3 weeks after the night at the Iroko tree, Ada was sitting alone late at night. The moonlight came through the window. Ada looked down at the floor. Her shadow was there, dark and solid and real, exactly as it should be. Original, perfect, hers. She smiled. Then she looked more carefully behind her shadow on the floor. A second shadow, not hers. She turned around. The room was empty. She looked back at the floor. The second shadow was still there, stretching across the floor beside her. Not threatening, not moving, just present, like something that had followed her out of the valley and decided to remain. Ada looked at the second shadow for a long time. Then she looked up at the empty room. Then she looked back down. She made a decision. Some things you do not look at directly. Some things you simply leave beside. She turned off the lights. She went to bed. In the morning, the house woke up. Ada made breakfast. Her mother helped. The children came out loud and hungry and completely indifferent to the impossible things that had happened to bring this particular morning into existence. Emeka drank his tea. The compound filled with ordinary sounds of a family beginning an ordinary day. And Ada stood in her kitchen in the morning light, with her shadow solid beneath her feet, and her mother beside her, and everything that had been wrong for 2 years now right. Not perfectly right, not without cost, but right in the way that matters most, the way that lets you breathe, the way that lets you stand in the morning light and feel the specific ordinary miracle of being completely here, completely real, completely present, with a shadow on the floor that belongs to you, and a mother standing beside you that you thought you had lost, and a family that does not know everything that happened, but knows enough to be grateful. This has been Whispers of the Forbidden, where some stories were never meant to be told, but needed to be.